أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'll be reciting Surah Al Imran, verse 196 to 173. ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. يستبشرون بنعمة من الله وفضل وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين. الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح للذين أحسنوا منهم اتقوا أجر عظيم. الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you for the recitation. Next, I would like to call upon Brother Ali Rizvi, who will come and read us salam. Let us welcome him aloud. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہ. باد حسین باد حسین کس نے کہا میں یتیم ہوں. باد حسین کس نے کہا میں یتیم ہوں. مقتل سے آ رہی ہے صدا میں یتیم ہوں. رو کر کہا سکینہ نے لاش حسین پر رو کر کہا سکینہ نے لاش حسین پر اب جا کے یہ یقین ہوا میں یتیم ہوں. بولی سکینہ شمر سے کانوں پہ رکھ کے ہاتھ. بولی سکینہ شمر سے کانوں پہ رکھ کے ہاتھ. گوہر نہ بہرے خدا میں یتیم ہوں، میں اپنے آنسوؤں سے بجھا لوں گی اپنی پیاس، میں اپنے آنسوؤں سے بجھا لوں گی اپنی پیاس، دریا سے لوٹ آؤ چچا میں یتیم ہوں، سر رکھ دیا سکینہ نے زینب کی گود میں، سر رکھ دیا سکینہ نے زینب کی گود میں، رکھنا پھوپھی خیال میرا میں یتیم ہوں، بعد حسین کس نے کہا میں یتیم ہوں، صلوات.
Thank you for that beautiful recitation. Next, I would like to call upon Hujjatul Islam al Muslimin, Sheikh Jaffer, to come up and give his book talk. Let us welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As we have Sheikh coming up, just a few announcements. Inshallah, tomorrow at 7:30, we're going to have a Q&A session in the school assembly area. So if you have any questions, you are requested to join the school assembly area. And if you would like to know about the other events coming up throughout the year, you can join our WhatsApp. And please don't forget to donate generously so we can continue programs like these and serve the community. Let us welcome Sheikh Jaffer with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. My respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My thanks again to the organizers allowing me a few minutes to be able to present some of the works that we have published. I brought with me a few of the works. Alhamdulillah, we had a delivery, which we didn't have the other night when we presented some of them to you. So on the far left, there is a book which is called The Hidden Treasure, which is a biography of Lady Kulthum alayha salam. We all know that there are two great daughters in the events of Karbala, Kufa, Sham, and back to Medina al-Munawwara. They not only led the qafila, but also led the spread of the message of Karbala until even you and I are able to share in that blessing today. Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra is the elder daughter of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Who is the younger daughter? Zainab as-Sughra. And what is her name? What is she known for as the title of? Lady Kulthum. However, very, very little is known about her life, tragically. According to the scholars, His Eminence Imam Al-Khomeini rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh was visited by Lady Kulthum alayhi salam in his dream. And he says that she complained that people didn't know about her. She complained to Sayyid Khomeini that people didn't know about her, her accomplishments, her life, her role. So after this, we wrote a biography of hers and an analysis of her life and contribution. And the idea is to honor her great contribution to Islam. So this book is available here called The Hidden Treasure, which is the biography of Sayyidah Kulthum alayhi salam. Next you can see is our covenant on the environment, which is called Al-Mizan. This one is for free. It is actually available from the website to be downloaded for free. As I mentioned on the previous night, myself and several of the leading Sunni scholars in regards to Islamic environmentalism, Islamic climate law, we worked collaboratively together to be able to write this covenant that was actually launched at COP. And the idea is, again, for us to be able to think about what our duties are towards the environment, inshallah. So you can find this available on the website, on Al-Mizan website, and you can download it for free. The next work is A Star Amongst the Stars, which is a biography of the great companion Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. And you all know about some of the things that Jabir has accomplished. For example, if I asked you who is the first ever Za'ir of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. But there are many, many great accomplishments that he had within his life. I'll give you one as an example that we go through in the book. There was a period of time when our fifth holy Imam, Muhammad al-Baqir, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, was criticized by the people of Medina for quoting hadith directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just think about that. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam comes 80 years after the Prophet. Normally a person would say, I heard my father Imam al-Sajjad say, who heard from his father Imam al-Hussein, who heard from his father Ali ibn Abi Talib, who heard from Rasulullah. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, to show his wilaya, used to skip that chain of narration and used to say, Qara Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. The people of Medina and the scholars of Medina literally cursed and abused Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, saying, look at this kid, he's quoting directly from the Prophet, how can we trust him? And the scholars of Medina tried exiling Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Imam needed a strategy to be able to overcome the criticisms that Ahl al-Medina had against him. One of the tactics Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam used was the authority of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, being that grand companion of the Prophet. First, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam used to go every day to the house of Jabir, and it would appear that he was learning a hadith from whom? Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. So Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam used to quote Jabir. Jabir said this, Jabir said that. And then very quickly, the plan, the strategy between them was that Jabir, the most famous companion living, would start quoting Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. You see, Ahl al-Medina used to go to Jabir because he was the last living companion. He said, tell us about the hadith of the Prophet. And Jabir would start telling them the hadith of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. So Jabir has a huge role in the history of Islam and Shi'ism, but unfortunately many of us may not know about it. So the book compiles the role of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari into one work. The next book is called Prospering Through a Cost of Living Crisis. On one of the previous nights I mentioned to you about the economic issue of al-afwa, that we are supposed to spend from our excess. Do you remember that? The ayah of the Quran, يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. They ask you, Ya Rasulullah, what should they spend? قُلِ الْعَفْوَ. Spend your excess wealth in the way of Islam. Do you remember that discussion that we had? So one of the books here actually goes through that economic debate of al-afwa, of spending. It goes through the proofs and how we're supposed to spend from our excess wealth. The book is actually more about what happens when there is a cost of living crisis, when there's an economic downturn. I don't know if you read, but 23% of all Americans, there's a stat that came out a couple of days ago, 23% of all Americans now skip one meal a day or worry about skipping one meal a day because of their economic circumstances. This is the most wealthy country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and yet almost a quarter of all Americans have food insecurity. How does Islam respond when there is an economic crash, when there is inflation? This is what the book responds to. It looks at the Quran and the Sunnah and the specific ways in which we respond to a cost of living crisis or an economic crash. And the last book that we mentioned is the Pure Life Hayatun Tayyibah, which is a book regarding diet and lifestyle and health in Islam. And we mentioned that it's co-authored between myself and my friend Zain Ali Panjwani. And we look at the ayat and the ahadith, and then we match that with the scientific examination of the best way that we are supposed to live our lives. So all the books are available here, inshallah. They will also be available on the sister side. If there are any questions about any of the books afterwards, I'll be more than happy to be able to help. Thank you again for your time and listening. And thank you again to the organizers for allowing us to be able to present the books. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So brothers and sisters, inshallah, I would like to request everyone on the ladies side and the gents side to please move to my right side, so your left side, so whoever's coming later on, it's easier for them to join us. So if you can help yourselves and move to your left side. Let us have a loud salawat as you guys move. Inshallah, these lectures will continue until tomorrow night, Laylatul Jum'ah, and we will be having the programs as usual. Tomorrow will be the last night right after Salatul Maghrib and Dua Kumel. And the tomorrow special program is a Q&A session, which will be held right before Salatul Maghrib at 7:30 on the second floor in the school assembly area. All of you are requested to attend these programs. And last but not least, another reminder that if you would like to join the WhatsApp group, you can ask any of the volunteers, and inshallah they will be able to guide you to join the WhatsApp group. And without further ado, I would like to call upon Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Sheikh Jaffer Ladak. Let us welcome him with the three loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you. For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad al-Mustafa, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll need 7 or several verses of the Holy Quran. If you can kindly open the following verses. The first one is chapter number 55, Surah Ar-Rahman. From verse number 7. And then we will need chapter number 25, Surah Al-Furqan, verse number 63. verse number 63. And then we will need chapter number 19, Surah Maryam, from verse number 88. And then the last ayah will be chapter number 7, Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 96. For the love of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Tomorrow night, inshallah, is our last discussion in our series, and we will be looking at certain conclusions, practical takeaways that we want to be able to leave the discussion with. Tonight, inshallah, our last main subject is for us to be able to reflect on the topic of the gravest and most urgent planetary challenge that all of us collectively face, and that is the preservation of our climate and the preservation of our environment. The series has been asking the question all along of how is it that we can actually forge a better world? Where do we start? How do we make a positive impact on society? And that the premise has been, every time we have seen an event occur in this last year, it should actually help us to reflect on the way in which we discover the Battle of Karbala and the movements that occurred immediately after. When Aba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh leaves Medina for the last time, he has that famous statement which is actually bringing together the entirety of his mission in just a few lines. إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمتي جدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. I'm not rising against the tyrant Yazid because this is something that I'm doing to make mischief, or I'm doing it out of just folly and fun. And I'm not doing it because I'm an oppressor or a tyrant. I am rising for one reason, and that is to bring reformation within the ummah of my grandfather and my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. If you imagine the gravest challenge that faces the world today, there is no greater challenge that faces the entirety of the human species, as well as all other species within this planet, and that is the challenge of rescuing our environment from global warming and the entirety of the planet from the way in which collectively the human community has been destroying this planet that we are living on. What we want to do tonight, inshallah, is not only to show you ayat and ahadith that speak about the importance of environmental preservation. I imagine that although it may be some of the verses might be new to you, or some of the ahadith might be new to you, but we need to go a lot deeper into the discussion. We need to really think about the behavioral change that is needed at three levels. One, the individual familial level. Two, the communal level. And then number three, the way in which our laws need to work for the safety of the entirety of the planet and the human civilization. And we'll spend half our time talking about the verses and ahadith, but then we'll spend half the time having a more frank dialogue and discussion about where the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam needs to take this particular topic. And what I hope is less majlis and more a very frank conversation about the idea of what Islam is, the idea of what Shiism is. Is it that when a disaster occurs, or when we are faced with a challenge, a human problem that occurs within our communities or civilizations, at what point does the Islam that you and I are practicing, or the Shiism that you and I are practicing, at what point does it genuinely become active and a leader in that particular matter? So that instead of the rest of the world leading us when it comes to these issues, we actually take the mantle and become an example for the rest of humankind. Inshallah, we'll come to this as we come along into the discussion. From the perspective of left and right politics, the topic of global warming, environmental disaster, climate disaster is probably seen through the lens of politics. Someone sitting here may be more left-leaning, someone sitting here may be more right-leaning. And as a result, the media and the propaganda that is put out by the two various different wings of politics will often help a person see that particular matter from the lens in which the donors or the political elite want you to be able to see those subject matters. However, this is not a political issue, and it certainly does not fall within the realms of left and right politics, just as nothing of Islam falls within left and right politics. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but you are not left and you are not right. You are not a Republican and you are not a Democrat. You are a Muslim. I know that's very hard for some people to hear, but you are not a Republican or a Democrat. You are a Muslim, and your politics should be Islamic politics. That should be obvious, but to many people it's not. But despite that, when it comes to the matter of the environment, because left and right will often try to determine the Overton window of what you can think, what you can say, what you believe, many people imagine this to be a political discussion. From the Islamic perspective, it is not. It is a religious discussion. How many of you have heard of a Republican pollster by the name of Frank Luntz? Luntz. Anyone? Open Google for a second and just Google his name. Frank Luntz. Often when I come to the States, I have to be very conscious not to say Luntz, because you'll all look at me and say, what's Z? Don't forget, you all speak English. Okay? So when it's Z, it's Z. When I say it's football, it's not soccer. Okay? You'll have it, Frank Luntz. In my humble opinion, he is the devil incarnate. And when you read his biography and his works, I think you will end up agreeing with me. Nevertheless, there is an incident that Frank Luntz talks about. Back when George W. Bush was the president of the United States of America, and the topic of global warming was becoming ever more apparent. Scientific journals becoming a discussion in mainstream media. Frank Luntz tells the story that George W. Bush said to him, too many people are beginning to jump on the bandwagon and believe in the science and the imminent global catastrophic disaster of global warming. Frank Luntz is a specialist in language. As a pollster, he has to ask certain questions in a certain way that elicit certain answers, and then he does data analysis, and then he spreads those opinions out there so that you and I fall for whatever the Republican Party wants to do. This is his paid job. And he's at the very top of the tree. So Lutz himself actually, you can find this very easily when you want to Google it, he actually confesses. He says when George W. Bush said to him that the donors, the gas-guzzling companies are becoming worried about public opinion and awareness of the issue of global warming, he went to Frank Lutz and said, what should we do? You know what he did? He thought, he pondered, and then he came back and said, in governmental spaces, you need to be able to change the language that is being used. Instead of using the word global warming, from now on you should choose climate change. You see, global warming has a negative connotation to it. Everybody knows global warming, the planet warms, ice sheets are going to melt, the seas are going to rise. This is going to cause global disaster. So as a government and as a party, whenever all government institutions want to talk about this, you have to move away from negative language to more neutral language that people will find acceptable. From now on, don't use the word global warming, use the word climate change. Because climates change. Sometimes weather is hot, sometimes it's cold, sometimes you have snow, sometimes you have sun. And so the average American will leave the negativity of this and they'll move towards the neutrality of that. He literally scoped a plan to be able to trick 300 million people overnight. They see it as political. It's a game. You are nothing more than toy soldiers in their game. And I can't wait. Allah is my witness. I can't wait for Allah to take him to account on the Day of Judgment. And I pray that I have the opportunity to see what happens to Frank Luntz just for that one action that he has done. This is not a political issue. Leave your party hat at the door. This is a religious issue. The way in which you and I look after what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you and I is a religious matter. The way in which we look after 7.5 billion people, the way we look after billions of different species, the way in which we leave the planet for our children and our grandchildren is a religious matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions within the Quran on many, many occasions. For example, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. Fasad has appeared upon the land and upon the sea by virtue of what man's hands have wrought, what we have done to the planet. Our actions have caused man-made global warming. And as a result, we are, instead of on track to be able to warm the whole planet by 1.5 degrees C by 2060, it is now imminent by the year 2030. And this has catastrophic consequences for all of us across the planet. The least of which is that by 2030, we will have 20 more days of extreme heat in every country in the world. Tell me, if you've been to Iraq and you see the rivers drying up, what will 20 more days of extreme heat do to that country, to that economy, to those people who live there? Or if I said to you, if you live in Pakistan, what will happen with 20 more days of extreme heat per year by the year 2030? Or if I was just to ask you here in the United States, how many times constantly do you see every single month, every single year in the last few years that a new level of natural disaster has occurred? The amount of fires that are raging in California, for example. Every time. I remember I was in the dars of His Eminence Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi. May Allah preserve him. He is the marja of Karbala. He was actually in his dars was talking about the environmental disasters that were occurring, particularly in the States, particularly in Canada. And this was a couple of years back, or maybe three years back. And he was talking about when there was a time when one disaster had hit after the other, after the other, after the other. And he said, I can't say for certain that this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving a clear sign that the environment is being destroyed, that natural disasters are happening to a people one after the other, and each time it's the worst of that kind. It's been the worst to hit that region in the history of that area, and so on and so forth. And he said, as much as I can't say this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving a direct sign, you have to be blind to be living through that and not change your behavior at all. And I can show you from the ahadith and Quran how much of a religious matter this is and not just political matter. I'm going to tell you one hadith which when I came across it, I think it's one of those moments in life where you shut the book and you say, Subhanallah, hats off to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This is the proof in the pudding that they are the awliya of Allah, and there cannot be any logical challenge to it. Because when you come across certain hadith, it is not possible for another human being to be able to mention those. Nostradamus could not have predicted some of the narrations that we have. We have narrations that talk about at the end of time, you will be able to look into the palm of your hand and speak to a person from the other side of the world. Is it possible for anyone other than with prophetic knowledge to tell you that? No. Now listen to this hadith from our 8th holy Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Hadith comes to us from companion by the name of Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Nasr. He says the following. سمعت الرضا عليه السلام. I heard Imam al-Ridha عليه السلام say, يقول قبل هذا الأمر بيوح. Before the event of the 12th Imam will be buyuh. قبل هذا الأمر. Amr refers to what? The return, the dhuhr of the 12th Imam, may Allah hasten his reappearance. قبل هذا الأمور or قبل هذا الأمر بيوح. I'm not going to translate the word buyuh yet. قبل هذا الأمر بيوح. The companion says, فلم أدري ما البيوح. But I didn't understand. I didn't know what is the meaning of the word buyuh. Sometimes even in any other language, if you speak English, I might use a word, you might use a word. You don't know the meaning of that word. An Arab is saying, I didn't understand the meaning of the word buyuh. فحججت. Anyway, I went on Hajj that year. فسمعت أعرابيا, and I heard a Bedouin يقول, say, هذا يوم بيوح. This day is buyuh. فقلت له, I said to the A'rabi, Mal buyuh. What is this word buyuh that you have used? I heard Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam say, before the advent of the 12th Imam will be buyuh. You've used this word. Mal buyuh. What is the meaning of the word buyuh? فقال, الشديد الحار. Excessive heat and warmth. Before the coming of the 12th Imam, there will be excessive warmth, or what you and I call today global warming. Can you imagine? Is it possible this hadith to come from anyone else? Can any other than Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam predict what we are living through in such accuracy to be able to say such things? And this is why we believe in the holy Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'een. So it is a religious issue. The Imam is predicting that there's going to be buyuh, warming that's going to take place. What else could it refer to? If it's not global warming, then what does it refer to? You have to be able to plausibly find another argument to say it's something else other than this global catastrophe that we are facing at the moment. The Quran tells us that the whole of the planet has been set up in a very finely balanced way. And that God forbid, when we destroy or abuse one of these fine balances, like anything else that is set up in balance, everything else is affected by it. If I knock off one leg of the table, not only does the table fall, but everything that is on the table will fall as well. Open your Qur'ans to chapter number 55, Surah Ar-Rahman. Which verse did we say to open from? Verse number? Ahsant. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ. And the heaven, he raised it high and he made the mizan, the perfect balance. Everything, not just the earth, but even the sky. Here, the word sama is, when we have the word samawat, let me do a little bit of tafsir for you so you try to understand. What is the difference between samawat and sama in the Quran? Okay, what is the samawat? What does that mean? Do we have 7 skies? Okay. We have 7 layers. Ahsant. What does that mean that we have 7 layers? What is the meaning of we have 7 layers, samawat? I'll tell you it this way. The sama that we are living in is not simply sky. The word sama in the Quran actually refers to the entirety of the physical universe. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we have made the sama wal ard, He doesn't mean sky. He means the entirety of the physical universe that dates back 13.5 billion years. Samawat are the layers of the unseen realms beyond this realm. So we are living in a sama ad-dunya, the physical realm of our planetary systems. The second sama from the samawat is another level beyond it, and then beyond it, and beyond it, and beyond it, up until the seventh of the samawat. It is an entirely inclusive statement. It's a longer tafsir, inshallah, maybe in tomorrow's Q&A, if someone wants to ask for the evidence of that, I will show you from the Quran the seven samawat and where the angels live in the samawat, where the jinnat live in the samawat from the Quran. But sama, most often in the Quran, refers to the entirety of the physical universe, all the billions of the galaxies that exist within it. Have a read of the verse. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ. And the heaven, he raised it high, and he made the balance. In the universe, he made a balance. Why? Allah تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. That you should not be inordinate. Do not be a taghi against that mizan. You should not be inordinate and destroy. A taghi, often we'll say, Yazid is taghi, correct? You'll say Ariel Sharon is taghi. You'll say Benjamin Netanyahu is taghi. Here, Allah says to you and I, don't be taghi. You yourselves don't become that person who is inordinate against the balance that God has set up within His creation. Allah tataghaw fil mizan wa aqimul wazna bil qisti wa la tukhsirul mizan, and keep up the balance. This is a statement of command from God. Wa aqimul wazn. Where else in the Quran do you hear aqimu? Ahsan. Aqimus salat wa atuz zakat. When you know the extent of the wujub that is placed within aqimus salat, what do you think here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying? Aqimul wazn. Make sure you uphold that balance that God has created within the physical universe. How? Bil qisti, with equity in the way in which you live. Wala tukhsirul mizan, and do not make that measure and balance deficient. Don't overgo it, being taghi, and don't do khusran on it. Don't make it less. Incredible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I tell you, everybody knows these verses. How often does our community recite Surah Al-Rahman? Constantly. Wedding comes, open Surah Al-Rahman. Funeral comes, people recite Surah Al-Rahman. Someone is dying in Sakarat al-Maut, what do they recite? Surah Al-Rahman. How often have we bothered to actually think about what God is telling us in these verses? And la tataghaw fil mizan. Open to chapter number 25, Surah Al-Furqan, verse number 60. Ahsant. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ. The servants of Ar-Rahman are who? Now, do you want to be considered as amongst the servants of Allah? Inshallah you do. It has from verse 63 to verse 74 a whole sequence of the sifat of Ibadur Rahman. Look at how Allah begins the entirety of the sifat. الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. The sifat of the Ibadur Rahman. The first sifat is that you walk on His earth gently. Does it mean that you don't do star jumps? Does it mean that you don't play fight on the bed and then throw your little brother off? No, it's not what it's talking about. It means you don't abuse God's planet and the system. That when you extrapolate from it, when you take from the earth, you must do it with care and gentleness, consideration for everything else within the planet. If we don't, then that's the first sifa corrupted from amongst being Ibadur Rahman. Now, in the covenant that we presented, there is a huge discussion on the issue of the mizan and the meaning and the application of the mizan. Amongst the discussions I want to mention in brief with you is that according to some of the leading scientists in the world, the planetary boundaries that we have are actually 9 boundaries. These constitute the mizan in the earth and within the planetary boundaries all the way up to the various levels of the ozone layer. I'm just going to mention them quickly, so at least you have knowledge of them. If anyone is interested, the scientific journal is called Ecology and Society. The title of the paper is Planetary Boundaries, Exploring the Safe Operating Space for Humanity. And the authors mention 9 areas in which we are supposed to preserve the planet. I'm just going to read to you part of the introduction and then tell you the 9. And I'm just going to give you one example of how simple it is to be able to preserve from amongst the 9 different planetary boundaries that we have to stay within to keep the mizan going. Anthropogenic pressures on the Earth system have reached a scale where abrupt global environmental change can no longer be excluded. We propose a new approach to global sustainability in which we define planetary boundaries within which we expect that humanity can operate safely within. Transgressing being taghi and la tataghaw fil mizan. Transgressing one or more planetary boundaries may be deleterious. It can delete. May be deleterious or even catastrophic due to the risk of crossing thresholds that will trigger non-linear, abrupt environmental change within continental to planetary scale systems. What are these 9 different planetary systems that need to be kept within the mizan, within the balance? Climate change, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone depletion, interference with the global phosphorus and nitrogen cycles, the rate of biodiversity loss, global freshwater use, land system change, aerosol loading, chemical pollution. Now, I just want to be able to explain to you the extent of the damage that we are causing by things that we can do so simply to be able to make change. You've all seen this? Simple cup. What do you do with this cup? What do you do with it before you throw it away? Drink from it. Have a chai, yes? Inshallah, tonight you will all have a nice chai at the end of the discussion. Yes? Normally, would you put this in the trash or would you try to recycle it? Try to recycle it. I'm going to give you a little stat. This is a back of a, in England we say back of a fag packets stat. You know what I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Yeah. So what do I mean that it's off the back of a cigarette box? What does that mean? No, what I mean by I've written it's like a quick stat for you. Like you understand that I'm giving you numbers, but it's not. It cannot be exact numbers. I'm giving you a broad expectation of something. How many people per day fly in and out of the United States of America? Yeah, how many millions? It's a nice guess. 3 million. That's what I said. It's back of a cigarette packet. Like I can't give you the exact number that fly in and out every day, can I? Right? Now sometimes you fly from inside the country to inside the country, correct? It's a domestic flight. Someone might fly from JFK to Orlando, for example. They're flying to MCO, for example. And of course, at times, other flights are international. You're flying from London Heathrow to JFK, for example, right? In total, 3 million people per day are flying in and out of the country, in and out of the country. Now, on a short flight, on a domestic flight, how many of these would you expect? You know that the steward or stewardess is coming around, tea, coffee, drink. How many per flight will you have? 2, 3 of them? Should we just say 2 as an example? On an international flight, how many do you expect to have? Well, when I flew here, I can tell you they came around 4 times just to give coffee in this. Okay? So let's just pick the number for the sake of picking it and keep it at 2 for domestic and keep it at 2 for international flights because it makes the math easier. That's why I said it's back of a cigarette packet kind of numbers for you. So if there's 3 million people coming in and out per day, and they're offered this twice, and every person takes it, how many times are they taking it? 6 million. Not too difficult. Now, what you may not know is this is not recyclable. Why is it not recyclable? Ahsant. There's a plastic coating on the inside, which is why your coffee or your chai doesn't seep through. Have you not noticed that when you drink this, it doesn't seep through? You don't burn yourself? Why is that? It's got a plastic coating. That plastic coating means that this cannot be recycled. It'll go straight in the trash, and it will go where? It'll end up in the oceans, and it will end up causing all of the imaginable damage that you can possibly fathom. If you had one rule for yourself, if I was flying from London to New York, and I just said, instead of me taking 4 different cups of coffee, every time they came round, I would just reuse this one cup. Do you know the extent of what we would actually be able to save in the planet? If we actually have twice used this, every day, those 3 million people coming in and out, this is enough to cover the surface of 3 soccer fields. That's how much trash. I'm picking to you one item on one incidental example of a flight that we are giving it 2, 3, 4 times. And the amount of trash on that daily flight of 3 million people who use this is enough trash to cover 3 soccer fields. Incredible, isn't it? And by the way, if you noticed, I didn't say football fields. Did you notice? There's no such thing as soccer. Ha! Grr, arg. Can you see? One item, one day. Can you imagine the destruction that we are causing to the planet? By our greed. By our buying into a lifestyle that is based on capitalism, materialism, and just disabusing ourselves from the idea that we can actually be better. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat and drink, but don't waste. Just a really simple ayah of the Quran that if I was just to implement it into one flight, would have the ability to change so much of, imagine later on, everything else that we are using, everything else that we are doing within our lifestyle. Now in the work, the covenant that we published, we've gone through a great deal of effort to be able to analyze the state of the planet and specific Quran and Hadith resource resolutions and solutions for the planet, for the things that we can do. And the idea behind this work is that we are inviting not just Muslim nations and governments to uphold this work, but all Muslim institutions around the world to be able to uphold this work. This is sent to Al-Azhar University. This is sent to the Hawza of Najaf, and the Hawza of Qom, and the Hawza of Karbala. This is sent to every major Islamic institution in the world, asking them to review it, challenge it, to debate the solutions that we are offering for the planet. And in the same way, I offer it to you as well. As a community, there are things that we need to be able to do in order to be able to respond, urgently respond to the types of challenges that we have. I'm going to pivot the discussion a little bit. In my humble opinion, the single greatest thing that can help us to be able to take this challenge seriously is that we urgently and desperately need our maraja al-kiram to take the topic of fiqh al-bi'ah, of the ahkam shar'iyya of the environment and climate seriously. Now, I said to you, this is an open discussion, and you may agree with me, you may disagree, but I'm having an open and frank conversation with you because I have the trust in you that you're mature enough to understand what I'm trying to put across to you. When did we know with scientific certainty that global warming, human-made global warming was a fact? Give me a decade. 1970s, 1960s? Anyone from the sisters? Close. We have scientific evidence going back to the 1930s. We have scientific evidence going back to the 1930s. We're talking 100 years that we have known with scientific certainty that we are warming the planet by the things that we do. To date, may Allah bless them and keep them as guides for us. Out of all the maraja' al-kiram, how many of them have produced a chapter of laws and fiqh on bi'ah, on the environment? How many? Chapter of law, يعني telling us what is haram, what is halal, what is mustahab, what is makruh. In terms of the things that we are doing, in terms of the gravest planetary, human, collective issue that faces us, how many Maraja al-Kiram have created a chapter of law on fiqh al-bi'ah, on the fiqh of the environment? How many? Not one. Not one. Not one. I remember once we had the honor of visiting His Eminence Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hussein al-Sistani, may Allah preserve him for us. We were with a group, and sometimes, you have the opportunity to ask a question or two. There was one person in the group, may Allah bless this person. We had one question. Sometimes you only get a couple of minutes. His Eminence is busy. What do you think was the one question that this person asked? He said, Sayyid, the toilets inside the haram are often very dirty and messy. Is there anything you can do about this? Allah is my witness that this question was asked. The one question, the 3 minutes that we had. I'm not saying it's not an important question. Tahara and Nizam is from Islam. At-Tahara min al-Iman. But inside the haram, there are people who are responsible for that. And we could ask them, can you please make sure that the standards are better? There's representatives in the haram to be able to ask that. When you go and visit your marja, when you are relaying conversations back to the wakil of the marja, when you're asking about what is happening in the hawza in regards to your needs here in the West, what is the most urgent conversation that we need to be able to bring up? Where is a bona fide fiqh of bi'ah and environment that actually governs our practices the same way it governs our practices in every other part of our life? What is haram and what is halal? Am I allowed to do this act that actually participates in global catastrophe and the potential massacre of millions of people, the potential destruction of my planet? Ask those questions. And there are many, many, many that we need to be able to ask of that kind. I'm going to give you one. And again, I said to you, you're a mature audience. I'm having a discussion with you, and you understand that I'm trying to prod you. I'm trying to poke you into awareness and I'm specifically being that like this from the pulpit tonight with you, because I trust you that you can understand what I'm trying to say. What are the single biggest contributors to global warming? What do you think? Carbon emissions is one of them. To global warming. Human waste? No. Okay, so one, emissions. Fossil fuel burning, emissions. You all know what that is. Another one, the United States empire. No, seriously. Genuinely, the biggest emitter of chemicals into the planet is the number of US bases around the world. Collectively combined, the US empire is the single biggest contributor to global warming. When we say the US empire is destroying the planet, it is multifold. We mean that in multiple different ways. And number three, I hope he's not going to go and tell the authorities that, oh, I have to go make a phone call. It's like, Biden, did you know about this? Someone shouted out, he'll forget. Best call him quickly. He's going to be out of the race in a week, I promise you. Number three is the topic of, or the issue of those gases that are released from the meat industry. From the meat industry. Our industrialized consumption of beef and the gases that are produced from that level of industrialized meat consumption is the single biggest contributor to global warming. I want you just to think about this very carefully. I'm not telling you to go vegan, and I'm not telling you to go vegetarian. But I'll give you a hadith that is considered to be sahih in our school of thought, in the school of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim wassalam, that the Maraji talk about. Hadith comes about the Holy Prophet Muhammadin al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alih. There was a time when, in the early period of the movement of Islam, that the amount of animals that they had to be able to take their weapons to the battlefront were very limited. And so they used to place the weapons on camels, they used to place them on donkeys, they used to place them on horses. Right? Makes sense. The donkeys that used to carry those weapons to the battlefield, the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wa temporarily made haram to eat, because if those animals were slaughtered, then they would not be there as a vehicle to transport the weapons to the battlefield. Are you with me? You understand? Obviously, if you don't have the weapons in the battlefield, how are you going to be able to defend the ummah from the Quraysh? Correct? So in order to make sure there were enough animals, the Prophet temporarily made haram shar'an. The dynamicism of his fiqh was that he temporarily banned. And if you actually happened to eat an animal that was prohibited from being eaten, it would have been sin upon you. An animal that normally you could have eaten, for these number of days and weeks, haram for you to eat. The Prophet temporarily banned something in order to protect the Muslim ummah from harm coming its way. That was temporary harm. We're talking about a period of a week, 2 weeks, a month, whilst the battle is raging. Here we are talking about the consumption of meat and animals that is producing globalized harm. Several billion people's health is affected by it. When you have these sorts of ahadith, we actually have hadith that open up the fiqh discussion to ask whether these can be used within the fiqh as examples to help us to be able to deal with the matters that we have at hand. The fact that the Prophet himself temporarily banned the consumption of a certain type of animal to protect tens of thousands of people immediately raises the question, well, today, can we also use certain ahadith like this to be able to temporarily reduce or stop the amount of meat that we are eating in order to protect the entirety of the planet? The point I make is that the Quran and ahadith covers all matters, doesn't it? Me and you believe that the religion of Islam is maximalistic. It has responses to everything in the entirety of human existence. So I'm asking you, where are the laws that we need to govern us when it comes to planetary catastrophe? I go further. And again, you understand I say this with complete humility. It's on you. You will not be able to rely on others to be able to make this change. You will not be able to rely on other pulpits bringing this up. If other pulpits are constantly just talking about Fada'il and Sunni Shi'i polemics, and that's all they ever want to talk about, that's their issue. But you cannot be like that. You have to be able to make Islam of value in society, lead society. Instead of us thinking that every time the world moves this way, we have to play catch up, it is time for Islam, and specifically the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, to actually start leading this world in the way in which it ought to be able to lead. So instead of us only asking our maraji' constantly about moon sighting, or constantly what day is Eid, maybe when we sit with our ulama, when we sit with our maraji', we actually talk to them about the things that are happening within our world and the things that we need to be able to help protect our planet. Ultimately, you and me will pass away very, very soon. It is this generation that is going to inhabit a planet that is unlivable. And then what will you do? How will you face your own children and grandchildren? How will we face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment? And so, what I want, inshallah, from tonight is for you to think about our role when it comes to this particular matter and the way in which our communities can start to make a serious response, and the way in which our Islam at the level of our madhab can make a serious response. If we can have certain behavioral change within us as individuals, within us as a community that serves 10,000 people, and if we can make a serious change within the madhab, then I promise you, we will be able to make a huge change within the life of everyone within the planet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter number 7, verse number 96, if you were only to have taqwa and God consciousness, we would change your situation for you. لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْكَ, we would open up to you all of the blessings that would come from the heavens and from the earth. It is within our power, and then Allah makes the change on our behalf, inshallah. When we talk about the rights of our children and grandchildren, the rights of this planet, it immediately raises the question of the rights of the slain martyrs of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, who were left unburied after the 10th of Muharram. The human body has hurma to it. The human body has a privilege and a sacredness to it that must never, never be desanctified. Imagine then the army of Yazid ibn Muawiyah trampling over the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein with 40 hooves. Our poets say the best way to be able to describe what happened to the chest of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein is that when you take a rolling pin and you begin to roll that dough, and how soft it becomes, and how you be able to pull it apart into pieces, this is what the chest of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein turned into. Imagine 10 horses galloping over the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Imagine the sound of the crunching of the bones that would be heard across the plains of Karbala. It didn't end there. Ibn Sa'ad ordered the heads of the bodies to be severed as well. This means the head of Abbas is severed, the head of Akbar is severed, the head of Qasim is severed. Nay, I want you to imagine even the young boys as young as Aun and Muhammad have their heads severed from them. Can you imagine that when Aba Abdullah al-Hussein buried the body of Ali al-Azhar, he not only did this because this was his baby 6-month-old boy, but can you imagine them coming with their swords and trying to behead even a 6-month-old baby? Ibn Sa'ad ordered the heads of the severed, or heads to be severed from their bodies. They were distributed to the various tribes that used them as a means to seek favor with Ibn Ziyad. According to the narrations, the Kinda tribe took 13 of the heads. The Hawazin tribe took 12. Banu Tamim took 17. Banu Asad took 16. The tribe of whom Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi belonged to refused to cut off the head of Hur. Can you imagine? They gave more sanctity to Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi than they did to Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. After this, one of the events that took place was the departure of the family from Karbala. What happened was that all of the women and children were gathered, and they were forcibly mounted upon the camels without saddles. This was a custom that the Turks and the Romans used against the captives in order to humiliate them, in order to make their journey as difficult as possible. I want you to imagine that the 23-year-old Ali ibn al-Hussein Zainul Abidin, who has been overcome by illness, overcome by so much illness that he can barely stand up. I want you to imagine that they place shackles upon his neck, that they place shackles upon his arms, that they place shackles upon his legs, but instead of placing him upon a camel like they did with the rest of the captives, they forced him to walk behind the camels, and every time that he would take a step, that one of those blades that was on his neck shackles would dig deeper and deeper until the neck of Zainul Abidin is bleeding, and every time he becomes tired, that someone like Shimr bin Diljoshim would come behind him and whip him and force him to hurry up. And then I want you to imagine that as the caravan is departing, they force the caravan to walk in between each of the shuhada. They are forced to see the headless bodies of their own family members, their brothers and their sons. I want you to imagine that as they see the broken bodies of their children, how would they feel? Would you not imagine that the mothers would fling themselves from the camel to try to crawl towards their children? Oh, Aun and Muhammad, what have they done to you, my babies? I want you to imagine
that when Sayyida Kulthum alayha salam sees the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, what does she say in her lines of poetry? She turns her face towards Medina. She says, "Oh grandfather, this is Hussein lying under the open skies of Karbala. His blood gives him his ghusl, and it is the sands of Karbala that gives him his kafan." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein.
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين. کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، 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 کاش عباس، کاش عباس. دونوں بازو وہ شہنشاہ وفا کے تھامے، لاش عباس پہ شبیر بکا کرتے تھے، بھائی تم بعد ہمارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش نہ مارے جاتے. اس طرح لگتی نہ اکبر کے کلیجے پہ سنا، اس طرح ہوتی نہ سادات کے خیموں میں فغاں، یوں نہ زینب کے سہارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش ہوتے تو اٹھا لاتے علمدار کی لاش، ساتھ شبیر کے دفناتے علمدار کی لاش، گرنہ زینب کے دلارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. گردن شاہ پہ یوں رن میں نہ خنجر چلتا، یوں نہ خورشید امامت سر مقتل ڈھلتا، یوں نہ سر نیزوں پہ سارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے، کاش عباس نہ مارے جاتے. پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
زیارت. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء. السلام عليك يا علي بن حسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر القادم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا خابة الإمام إمام الإنس والجان. عجل على ظهورك عجل على ظهورك يا ابن الحسن يا ابن الحسن. عجل على ظهورك عجل على ظهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.